Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 11 o'clock session of our third annual New Mexico Adult Virtual Conference. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. I know we have, and we're just going to keep this momentum going. My name is Jamie Trujillo, and I will be moderating for the brilliant Cash Clifton, and he is going to be talking to you today about an introduction to coaching. So before we get started, I just want to make sure that you definitely go to signin.nmdelt.org to log in your attendance. There's a QR code right here on the screen. If you have a QR code reader and you just want to scan that, you can do that at any time during the session. Just make sure you go in and you sign in for coaching introduction. With that, I will hand it over to Cash.
Wow, well, thank you for that generous introduction, Jamie. I hope I meet expectations.
You always do.
So my name is Cash Clifton. I'm one of the NMDELT team members, and I want to talk to you today a little bit about coaching and motivating students. So in adult ed, we work with a population that is not always that motivated to be there. A lot of things could be going on. Oftentimes we work with students who don't even believe in their own ability to succeed, and that can be a really challenging issue. So this morning at 9 o'clock in our virtual conference, Therese Baca-Radler talked about teaching grit and growth mindsets to your students correlated with Ed Ready. I really encourage you to check that webinar out if you haven't already. It goes along really well with what we're talking about in coaching today. So as we talk about coaching, we're talking about creating a culture in your classroom that teaches students to believe in themselves, that teaches students they can succeed, and teaches students self-directed learning. It teaches them to be independent. So I hope this is useful to you. So this is the theory behind creating the culture. Teresa's webinar was more about specifically what kind of curriculum you can create that works really well in this kind of environment. So I'd like to start out, and I just want to ask a question. What is coaching? And I don't have like the definition. I think there's a lot of different definitions depending on where you look and who you ask. So I'm going to ask for people to respond in the YouTube comments. What does coaching mean to you? So I'll give you a minute or two. So what does coaching mean to you? Really no wrong answers here. I can't really think of much of anything you'd say that I would tell you you're wrong.
So yeah, we'll give it a couple minutes in the chat just to see if anybody responds.
Great.
And I know this might be a little long of an answer, so.
Yes, it might. I really debated between YouTube comments or Poll Everywhere. Polleverywhere.com is a really nice free tool if you ever want to ask students questions like this or survey them.
So it looks like we got a couple of responses. Cindy says that coaching is providing guidance and empowering students to take ownership of their own education.
Boy, if I was given grades, that would be an A+. Absolutely, Cindy.
And Mariah says that coaching is guiding a student to achieve their goals and dreams.
A+ to you too, Mariah. Very good. Very good. I think you'll see when we get to my definitions that we're all on a very similar page with that. So I'm going to go ahead and show my definition. If anybody else wants to share, Jamie, if you would just interrupt me and let me know, please.
Absolutely.
So one definition is that it's unlocking a person's potential to maximize their performance. It's helping them to learn rather than teaching them. And that's according to John Whitmore. Another definition, academic coaching. So there are different kinds of coaching. We're talking specifically about academic coaching today. So academic coaching is an ongoing partnership to help students produce fulfilling results in their lives. Through the process of coaching, students deepen their learning, take responsibility for their actions, improve their effectiveness, and consciously create their outcomes in life. And notice it's the student that's creating their outcome in life. It is not the teacher. So this is about teaching people independence, self-efficacy, and that kind of thing. And so that definition is according to Lifebound. Jamie, did we have any other definitions? come through?
Nothing yet. No.
Okay. Well, let me know if we do. So those are some definitions of coaching. So according to the International Coaching Federation, and so there are lots of different coaching associations. They all have similar definitions, but a little different. So according to the International Coaching Federation, there's this working definition that's partnering with clients. I think it's more appropriate to say students in our context. So partnering with students in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So it's about inspiring students to reach the potential that they want. Now, as far as their potential, that's probably the potential in terms of what the student sees themselves doing as far as a student's goal. Sometimes the teacher's definition of the student's potential is a little different than what the student sees. So it's really about what does the student want to achieve. The role of the coach is to provide an ongoing partnership designed to help clients, again, students is probably more appropriate here, produce fulfilling results in their personal and professional lives. Coaches help people improve their performance and enhance the quality of their lives. And I am a firm believer that education in general has the power to enhance the quality of people's lives. Then there's preparation and skills. So coaches are trained to listen, to observe, and to customize their approach to individual student needs. They seek to elicit solutions and strategies from the student. They believe the student is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And that's a very important thing. So the idea that the student is whole, you're not trying to fix students. And that's very important because you don't want to be counseling students. Counseling helps people become whole. As a coach, you're assuming people are whole. And we'll talk a little bit more about how coaching is not counseling. The coach's job is to provide support to enhance the skills, resources, and creativity the student already has. So here you believe the student is bringing something to the table. So this is very much a strengths-based approach. So this is what's called the coaching continuum. So this is continuing to attempt to answer the question of what is coaching. So it's a move from pushing to pulling. So the idea here is going from the bottom of this chart to the top. You're getting closer to coaching the further up you can go. So pushing, that's where you're telling, that's where you're lecturing, and that's where you're giving advice and guidance. In coaching, you're not so much looking to give students advice and guidance. Remember, you're not trying to fix them. Another thing to remember is you're not trying to make the student into you. You're trying to figure out who does the student want to be, what does the student want to be, and help them to lead to that. So that's where you start getting better at giving feedback. So giving feedback is better than advice or guidance. But suggesting options is better than giving feedback. Paraphrasing and summarizing is better than suggesting options. And then asking questions and listening to understand, that's kind of the best way to do coaching. So you're definitely not advice giving. You should be doing lots of listening, and you should be letting the student know that you're listening. Ways to let students know that you're listening. There's an acronym called OARS. So open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And if you're interested in knowing more about that, please reach out to me or please contact InMDelt, and we could look at setting up a training specific to your program that looks at those concepts more in depth. So there are some general steps for coaching. I'd say coaching is more of a conversation style than anything. It's a conversation style that creates this very supportive culture in your classroom. You don't necessarily have to follow all of these steps. It's just kind of a guideline. So a good rule of thumb is to discover. So find out what the student would like to do. And notice in these steps for coaching, notice I'm not phrasing things as questions, I'm phrasing things as statements. That's a concept from Miller and Rolnick's motivational interviewing, that a lot of times you get more natural conversation through statements than questions. Kind of a rule of thumb within motivational interviewing is for every question you ask, you should try to make 2 or 3 statements. Now, if you ask a question, should you be sitting there counting on your fingers the number of statements you make? Absolutely not. But in general, you don't want to just be sitting there battering a student with questions. So tell me what you would like to do. Maybe another way to phrase that is, I'm curious to know what you would like to do, or tell me about your goals, something along those lines. And there again, it's the student saying what they want to do. It's not you telling them what they should do. After the discovery phase, so there are some goals set, then that's the dreaming phase. So that's where you get the student to imagine where they want to be. So you might ask them, what does that look or feel like? If I want to turn that to a question, maybe I say, tell me about what that would look or feel like. Oh, and I have an extra O in my look there that I just noticed. So you discover, you set the goals, you dream. So you talk about what it would look like if the student is successful, because maybe they haven't thought of that. Maybe your student is so in the habit of failing, maybe that's become normal to them that they don't even stop to think about what would success look like. Once you dream what that success would look like, this is where you want to develop a plan. So tell me about the steps you will take, and from there, you want to go ahead and dive in. So I'd like to know when you will begin the plan. I think procrastination to some extent is a human tendency. If you've ever seen the TED Talk by Tim Urban, he argues that we're all procrastinators to some extent, and I don't know if that's entirely true or not, but it's definitely an interesting concept to think about. But here's where you want the student committing to: this is when they're going to take action. This is when they're going to implement the plan that you did in the last step. And then finally, dedicate and celebrate. So tell me about how you're going to celebrate your success, and let the students know that if they work really hard, they deserve to celebrate. They deserve whatever is going to make them stop to appreciate whatever they've done there. So it's just kind of a good rule of thumb for steps in coaching. You don't necessarily have to do every single step in order. This is just a general guideline as far as action planning with your students, and then ultimately celebrating with your students when they're hopefully successful. Now, coaching is not counseling. I cannot say that enough. So here's a little chart that kind of goes through the differences. So counseling deals with the past. Coaching tends to deal more with the present. So understand, counselors, they have a master's degree or higher, and they're state licensed to practice counseling. Coaches, there are some foundations that will license you as a coach, but you don't necessarily have to be licensed for that kind of thing. Counseling gets into clinical things like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, substance use disorders. As a coach, you should never try to treat a mental illness or a substance abuse disorder. You're not qualified for it. And please understand there is a lot of potential to do harm to your student if you do try to get into these things. Sometimes in the coaching session, things will come out related to clinical issues. So if you're going to do coaching, I just suggest you know where to refer your students. So here in the state of New Mexico, every single county has a designated core service agency. The core service agency provides certain services. They provide counseling services. Usually they provide some kind of psychiatric service. Usually they provide some kind of comprehensive community support. So please be sure you're aware of who the core service agency is in your county. If you're not sure who the core service agency is, you can Google core service agencies in New Mexico, or feel free to reach out to me by email, and I can send you the link directly to find out who your core service agency is. In counseling, you're trying to heal the person. So the ultimate goal is to heal the person of some kind of trauma, some kind of clinical issue, something. Whereas in coaching, keep in mind, we're assuming people are whole. We assume they don't need healing. We assume they're capable. And so coaching is more about goals and action steps. In counseling, you question and adjust the belief system, whereas in coaching, you make commitments. Now, questioning and adjusting the belief system, I do think that happens in class sometimes through things like self-reflection, but understand that's more something a teacher would do. That's not something that you would directly do in a coaching situation. Counseling, you establish healthy thinking and behaviors, whereas in coaching, you're maximizing potential and getting to the next level. One thing they do have in common is they do both support health and wellness. So they want to see the student do well and succeed, and not just in school. That's just to succeed in life in general. Let's see.
Can I pause you for just a second, Cash?
Sure.
Cindy had a really great question. She said, you're talking about the difference between mental health counseling and coaching. She wants to know, what is the difference between academic counseling and coaching?
You know, I'm not sure there's a real clear difference between, you said academic advising, correct?
Academic counseling. I wonder if those terms are actually interchangeable.
I do wonder, I'm kind of wondering if they are interchangeable. So kind of what I see in my mind is an academic counselor or an academic advisor could use coaching techniques. So I'm not sure they're exactly interchangeable. So in my mind, an academic counselor and an academic advisor, that's referring to their job duties, helping students get enrolled in programs, degree planning, that kind of thing. Whereas coaching is more about the culture and that strengths based approach. So I think way back in my past when I had a very traditional advisor as an undergraduate, they'd kind of sit down with the list of classes for me and tell me, okay, you're going to take these classes next semester. And I was in a very passive role. As the student, I had kind of the expert there telling me what to do. Whereas an advisor that takes more of a coaching approach, they're going to sit down with that list of classes and ask the student, okay, what do you want to take next semester? Do you want my advice on this? What's your goal? When do you plan to graduate? And so I see it as going deeper in those kind of roles. So, Jamie, do we have any other questions
That's
at
it
this
so
point?
far. Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Sure. And Cindy, if I didn't answer your question fully, please continue to type in the YouTube comments, and we'll keep trying to get you answers to that. So our next slide here is coaching is still not counseling. I think this is the third time I've had this on the presentation because I think it's just so important. It assumes that the person is capable. It assumes that the person is whole, that they're able to do these things. So in therapy, there's a disorder, there's something that needs to be treated, there's something that needs to be fixed. That's not really the case in coaching. Again, coaches don't need certification or licensure, but a therapist or a counselor definitely needs training and license. And once again, I know I've said it before, but please be sure you're not trying to practice therapy or counseling with your students. That is something that can cause a lot of harm. So as we're talking about coaching and we looked at those plans, there are a few things you want to avoid. So these are conversation roadblocks. So in this framework, these are things that could shut down the conversation. Maybe they put the student in more of a passive role. Maybe they make the teacher more of the expert. And that's not necessarily what we're trying to do here. We're making the assumption the student is the expert on their own life. So you as the teacher here should not be telling the student about their life because they know better than you do. So as the coach, you want to avoid ordering, directing, and commanding. You want to avoid warning or threatening. You don't want to give unsolicited advice, suggestions, or provide solutions. Now, sometimes your advice is relevant. So I'm not saying you can never give advice. Notice it says don't give unsolicited advice. So a good rule of thumb is, this again is for motivational interviewing, it's ask, provide, ask. So if you have some advice or if you have a suggestion that you think is relevant, don't just jump in there and share that. Ask the student, say, hey, I've been through something like this in the past. Is it okay if I give you some advice here? If the student says yes, go ahead and give your advice. If the student says no, please keep it to yourself, because chances are if you start giving advice, the student's already told you they're probably not going to be listening. In general, you don't necessarily want to be the one to provide solutions in coaching. You want to teach the student to be independent. You want to help them figure out what kind of solutions they would like to come to. You don't want to try to persuade. Again, you're making the student autonomous. You don't want to moralize, preach, or tell the person what they should do. In general, should is kind of a four-letter word in coaching. So it's a good idea to avoid the word should if at all possible. It's also a really good idea not to begin sentences with the word you. There is some research that shows that can make people defensive. You don't want to disagree, judge, criticize, or blame in these coaching conversations. You also don't want to agree, approve, or praise. So the idea here with coaching is you want to create that intrinsic, that internal motivation within a student. If you're being their cheerleader the whole time, then that's more of an extrinsic motivator. So at that point, the student may be trying to think about what do you want them to say. Maybe the student's trying to please you rather than having that really genuine conversation. Shame, ridicule, and labeling. I hope most of us avoid that as teachers in general. You definitely don't want to interpret or analyze. Psychoanalysis is something you want to stay away from. Please don't ever try to psychoanalyze your students. Again, you don't want to be a counselor. Don't reassure, sympathize, or console. Now I say no sympathy, but now empathy is a really good thing. So big distinction there. Sympathy you want to avoid, that's our conversation roadblock, but empathy can help with the conversation. You also don't want to withdraw, distract, humor them, or change the subject. Sometimes people try to make a joke and try to avoid some of these difficult conversations. Whoops, I went one too far there. Now, I'm not saying these things are bad. What you see on your screen here, there are contexts for this. If I have a student acting up in my class that's causing the other students not to be able to learn, I probably am going to direct them. I'm going to say your behavior is inappropriate. I might give them a warning or a threat. I might say, I need your behavior to stop, or I'm going to ask you to leave the class. So understand, coaching is not for everything. You definitely still need to manage your class. Believe in yourself as a teacher. You know how to teach. You know how to manage your class. Coaching is just a way to help these people set goals. It's a way to get students working and to get them in gear. So definitely trust your judgment as a teacher before anything is what I suggest. So what I'd like to do next is actually engage you in a coaching conversation. These things can be a little tricky to do over the internet, so I'm going to try to show you how you can do this over the internet. So on my screen here, this is a life wheel. So the idea is you have these different areas of your life. So I have my career, money, health, and so on. And what you do is you want to rank yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. So like right here on physical environment, I'm very comfortable with my physical environment that I live in. So I give myself a 10. And so I drew the little blue there to indicate a 10, and I wrote a 10 here. Fun and recreation, I'm not doing so hot on. So I gave myself a 5 on fun and recreation. So I drew the 5 in there, and then I came over to the, whoops, I keep hitting the wrong button. Then I came over to the side and drew a 5 here. This can be a really nice activity with students because it starts getting them to think about balance. So when I use this with a class, I like to tell students, you know what, fill out your life wheel, and then let's look at how bumpy your wheel is. So the idea is if somebody had 10s and everything, they would have a nice smooth wheel, whereas my wheel would be really, really bumpy. You'd be falling down into some valleys and having to climb up some hills if you were trying to drive around my wheel. It's really nice to get students reflecting. It's a really nice way to start with some goal setting. And so I would like to work through an example of a life wheel with you today. And I'm going to show you how you can do this kind of thing electronically. So of course you can print out a life wheel and do it paper and pencil, but electronic can be pretty nice too. So I'm going to ask everybody to reflect on your life balance for a few minutes. I'm going to ask you to fill out a life wheel. So please go to tinyurl.com/y3kda9tt, and that will let you get your own life wheel. Now, as you're completing your own life wheel, I'd like you to think about how you could use this with students and write your thoughts in the comment section. And Jamie, I'd like to demonstrate how this life wheel can be filled out electronically. Would you mind putting that link into the comments so that people have it?
I am absolutely trying to do that right now. Let's see if it'll let me. Tiny URL.
Oh, that's right. YouTube doesn't always like.
I left out the HTTP, so maybe that helps. So yes, I left out the HTTP, so it should work. And really, if you just start with the T anyway, you should be able to get it. So it is in the chat, guys, if you want to use the chat to be able to type that in.
Okay. By the way, if you haven't used tinyurl before, it's a really nice website, tinyurl.com. That's where you can take a big, long website and condense it down into something like this, the tinyurl. So again, tinyurl is in the YouTube comments as I'm taking it off my screen here. So the tinyurl takes you to this web page here. When you click on it, you're actually going to be at the top here. And if you scroll down, you can get a blank wheel of life balance. And I want to work on editing that electronically. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hover my mouse over this. If you're on a mobile, so if you're on a Windows device, you can right click. If you're on a mobile device, if you'll hold your finger down for about 3 seconds, you'll see a similar image come up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save the image. So I'm going to save the image to my desktop here. So there it's saved. I can see down here that it opened. And then I'm going to go into an online photo editor. There's lots of great online photo editors out there. If you're on a Windows device, you have Paint. There's lots of things you can use. This one is Pixlr. So this is pixlr.com, and I really, really like Pixlr. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go, okay, new image. Oh, wait, no. Yeah, so new image. So I can create a new image. That's if I just want to start out with a blank canvas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open an image from my computer. So right there, I can see the Wheel of Life that I downloaded, and now the Wheel of Life is here in Pixlr. I can come down here to this little arrow and expand the area I'm working there a little bit. And I'm going to start drawing. So I wonder if I can make this. No, I can't make the tools a little bit bigger. So over here on the left is the pencil tool and the brush tool. So I am going to click on the brush tool there. Now I have my main color set as green. I'm going to click on that. So you can move around the wheel here. Just notice there's a couple of different things. So I think I'll go hot pink here. And notice there's a couple of different ways. So this kind of diamond in the middle, you can adjust the brightness. The circle on the outside, that's where you adjust the actual color. So let's go, I don't know, I'm feeling a really bright pink today. So we'll say okay. Up here on the top, you can come down to your brush. 9 is a nice brush size for me. Notice you can have kind of a shadowy effect here. And so I'm just going to click on that. And so now I can start drawing. So this is a slightly different Wheel of Life than I had. I tell students they're more than welcome to change what the slices mean. So maybe if a student doesn't want to focus on spiritual or self-time, I tell them, you know what, cross that out and put something in that you think is more appropriate. So spiritual or self-time, I don't know, I think I'll give a 7. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I will color in there with my mouse. If you've never tried to draw on a computer before, it's really awkward at first, but you get a little bit better with practice. And then I'm going to mark that I have a 7 right there. So there's my nice 7. So I am going to work on my wheel here, and I'm going to ask that those who are viewing also go into Pixlr and work on your wheel. If you have questions or if issues come up, please type into YouTube chat, and Jamie can read those to me.
And I have to say, I'm actually on my phone right now. I saved the image just like you said, and I'm highlighting the different parts of the wheel with my finger, and it is easy to do even on a mobile device for your students.
Yeah, that's part of why I like this Pixlr website. It's really nice. You can create an account, or you can just go in here and work with no account. I think that's another advantage is a lot of these editors require you to create an account, whereas this one doesn't. You can get creative and color code. So maybe I want to do one pink. I don't know. I have a pretty good social life. I have lots of friends, so maybe I'll give that a 9. Again, I hope you're working on these. And so as you work on this, I have, 3 minutes left in this presentation. I'd really like you to think about what are some things you would ask students as they complete an activity like this. What kind of reflection do you think would be nice? You can also use it to practice reading and writing. So maybe you have the students do some journaling at the end, or maybe you have them read an article about self-care at the end and annotate that. Lots of things you could do with this. Again, I'll hold off so people can work on their Wheel of Life balance.
We don't yet have any questions coming in, just to let you know.
No problem. No problem. I'm assuming people are working on their wheel.
Me too.
If you want to make this as an assignment, maybe have the student fill out their Wheel of Life balance and upload it to Google Classroom or email you or something like that. So you can have your students share their Wheel of Life in that way. You can also set up video chats with students. So maybe you want to get on Google Meet, Google Hangout, something like that, and talk with them as they work on their Wheel of Lives. Have them present their Wheel of Life. There's lots of things you could do with this. But I really see this as being about balance. lots of different formats of Wheels of Life out there. I suggest you just do a Google search, find one that you like. While you're doing that, I do want to go ahead and point out my final slide in my presentation here is I just have a minute or so left. These are some coaching resources. So don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel, pun intended there. There's lots of great things out there. So lots of great activities already there. Lesson plans are available on some of these. So these are just some of the coaching resources that I like. And I will be sure that this presentation is posted on the virtual conference webpage so that you can have access to the slideshow and these links directly. And don't forget to sign in if you haven't signed in already. So that's the time I was allotted for my presentation. Jamie, have we had any questions come in?
Nothing yet, and there is a slight delay with the video, so we can wait a minute or two. Usually the delay is about 10 seconds, so it's not very long. But yes, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat, and I can ask Cash those questions. Cash, will you bring up I think it's the second to last slide that you have?
This one?
Yes. While we're waiting for questions to come in, if you would like for us to come out and provide any kind of training to you, please feel free to go to our website, nmdelt.org, and there's a Connect with Us section. And if you just click on support, you can request some personalized training for your staff. You can also if you just go to Connect with Us and meet the team, you can see the contact information for all of the NMDELT team. Then the last thing that I wanted to make sure that we announce is next week there will be an ELA Tech Talk, and that of course is going to be provided by Dawn and Monse. And the Tech Talk title, let me just find that here. I apologize because I had it up and it went away.
And while you're looking at that,
Sure.
if I can just say, if you're thinking about DELT support, we're happy to support you virtually. So we can set up video chats like this. We talk on the phone, we communicate by email. Oftentimes, we're also happy to drive out and do a face-to-face training with your program. So today I'm presenting the virtual conference from Clovis because I was just at the Clovis Community College doing a training with them yesterday. So we really are happy to work with you.
Absolutely. Okay, so yes, Wednesday, April 17th at 12:30 p.m. will be the third in the spring series of ELA webinars titled Practice and Conclusion, Tech Strategies that Reinforce English Learning. So please stay tuned for a flyer and a login link for that presentation. And doesn't look like there are any questions coming in, so we can definitely wrap this up. But you can always contact Cash directly after today if you have any questions that you think of later on.
But by all means, feel free to reach out to me. We are working with a coaching expert. Peggy Marquez is going to be joining us, and so NMDELT will be offering some more intensive coaching workshops coming this summer. So if you would like to learn more about this, understand today this was just a brief introduction. We just kind of skimmed the surface of it. But if you do want to go in depth, please talk to NMDELT, and we'd be happy to support you more on coaching.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cash. That was a really great webinar, and thank you all for viewing, and we hope you enjoy the rest of our third annual virtual conference.